That's good. So if you could just introduce yourself to me, so if you could say the name, your position, your last club and your international.
Yeah, my name is David Flatman. I was a prop for Saracens and Bath, and I also played for England.
Why did you decide to play prop? How did that all sort of come about?
Actually, I think Mother Nature decided that for me, really. I joined a rugby club at 8 because my father played prop, which is probably where the genetics come from. And in those days, it was 2 in the front row and 1 in the second row, so I was the strong guy who went behind and kind of, I guess I was a lock, but as soon as we moved up, it became obvious that what I was best at was pushing, so I moved up to the front and stayed there, but it was really to do with body type, and luckily I enjoyed it.
Okay, brilliant. Which side did you play, loose or tight, or did you not really have a preference?
I played loose head. I covered tight head when needed. I got a couple of caps on the tight, but it wasn't that good. I played for Bath for a while at tight head when we had injury problems, but I wasn't one of that rare breed that can cross over and be equally effective. I was definitely a loose head.
Okay. What is the difference between a loose head and a tight head prop?
It's completely different, really. So at tight head, ultimately, they're very aggressive now, but you're looking to anchor a scrum, whereas a loose head is looking to protect his hooker, give his hooker enough height to be able to hook the ball, to keep their tight head up, as it were, to be able to hook the ball comfortably enough, but not give too much height that an opposing tight head can put pressure on the hooker and pop him out of a scrum. There are a lot more angles to think about. Usually a tight head will dictate the angle, so if he bores in, a loose head will have to chase. You then become susceptible to collapsing in and folding under, or being penalised for boring, or ultimately compressing. If a tight head gets the nudge on you, actually driving an opposition tight head into your hooker and putting more pressure on the hooker. So there becomes a real challenge trying to, sort of negotiate a tight head's approach. Whereas on the tight, it's kind of, you're also using the different part of the body. On the loose, you have to be really strong on the right, on the inside, and your left arm where it binds is kind of not that important. On the tight, you're really looking at, it looks like they're really working the right shoulder, and often they do, but that inside, that left side of your body is really important. So that's why it can feel so alien swapping over. It's like scrum half and fly half, really.
Okay. Would you agree that the tight head is possibly the more defensive of the two props and the loose head is possibly the more attacking version?
Well, as a rule, yeah. Tight head becoming more defensive purely because he's attacked more, because he has a natural 2-on-1 against him. The hooker and loose head are against him. And if you can drive an opposition tight head backwards, it means that, with a back, if you can drive him backwards 6 inches or a foot, it means his back row swings right the way around, and it makes any movement to the right either impossible or very, very difficult. So you can actually, by punishing a tight head prop and sending it backwards, you can actually cut a team's attacking options by 50%, because they have to go left in effect. If they don't, they go in the long way around, and it becomes easy to defend. So you also driving the back towards your scrum half who's following theirs around. So ultimately, because of the dangers of going backwards as a tight heads become more defensive. Okay.
What is your job as a prop then during the set pieces, so scrumming the line out?
Well, scrum time, things have changed. It's not just a restart anymore. It hasn't been for a generation or so, but it's to provide good quality ball for the back line, really. So it's to group everyone together and provide some grunt and, do what you can to facilitate the ball going in and coming back cleanly for your team to play with. I always found my job to be on our ball, try and do whatever my hooker needed. And with the laws before they were jigged at the end of last season was to actually try and generate as much forward momentum as possible, to try and look for penalties on our own ball, try and plough a team backwards, because you could hit and go. You can't anymore, or not so easily. On opposition ball, pressure tight head props, don't let them get a right shoulder, don't give them an easy attacking option to the right, away from our scrum half who's chasing round, because it gives them a natural numerical advantage. So and line outs, again, do what's needed. So if my head has to go in somewhere to stop the opposition getting in there or getting their hands on the jump, and my head goes in there, if I'm lifting, he has to be lifted high, consistently high. He has to be held, for the correct amount of time until the ball's in his hands, so he's not losing height before the ball gets there. Have to withstand opposition trying to remove you and stop you doing that job. And once he's lifted and ball's secured, it's getting my head and shoulders in the right place to protect the guy with the ball. So, and on the opposition, it was either taking out a lifter on landing, so sort of removing my opposite guy, or trying to get inside and underneath the opposition to cause some disruption and halt their progress.
Okay, you say there that you're obviously in the line that you have to get your jumper as high as possible. Obviously, when you've got props of different sizes, so you've got someone like Andrew Sheridan who's 6'4", and you've got other props that aren't as tall. Can that be a disadvantage in the line-out?
Well, you actually tend to find it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, look at the props at Claremont. You know, Derek Ashvili and Domingo. You know, those guys are 5'9", 5'8", 5'9", and they get guys up. So I was 6 foot, I am just over 6 foot, so I was about average. But you know, I had my shoulders operated on a lot, so I had to develop a new technique for getting them high because I don't have the flexibility. So I would end up working a lot more in the gym on explosive power, moving upwards with legs and arms, and I would, when it went right, I would actually try and get a double lift, a double pump, so I would get them by the knees and I would throw them and catch them again. So a good lift for me was me ending up holding their calves or even their ankles, and if I ended up with stud marks down here, you know, after a game or a torn shirt, I knew that I'd got the guys high enough because their feet were all level with my head. So someone who was 6'4" or 6'5" wouldn't have to do that. But ultimately I had to find a way to deal with having short arms and inflexible shoulders. And that was just more explosive power work and getting the guys up just as high as anybody else. Ultimately, if you got we had a guy here called Peter Short, who was a back row player, 6'6", incredibly strong. If he's lifting from the back, life's easier. But you'll find that props are generally the strongest guys at lifting, so they can boost them and sort of double pump them up in the air there.
Okay, brilliant. Let's move opposite then. So what is your job as a prop during sort of open play?
It completely depends. I mean, it depends what sort of prop you are. So when I played here at Bath, for example, with Matt Stevens, he wasn't there. He hit rucks, of course he did, and made a lot, but he wasn't there to do unseen work. He was brilliant at carrying the ball. He was the best prop in the world at that point at carrying the ball. He was a brilliant defender. So for me, it was kind of an unwritten rule that I would hit 35 rucks a game and he would hit 10, but he would carry ball and win us games. So I knew that we needed him to do that. He was massively valuable. So my job was ruck to ruck to ruck, making sure the scrum half's got decent ball to pass, to get away and he's not getting pestered. In loose play, it can be anything. It can be backing up, supporting, just being there in case the ball comes free. It can be punching holes yourself. It can be just make a ball carry so someone else doesn't have to, just to get another phase through, give guys time to recycle. A lot of the time it can be following in the better ball carriers and clearing the rucks. And in defence, you've got a vital role. You, as a big fella, you probably want to try and work your way in, so you're not caught out wide against fast guys. You want to try and work your way in as close to the breakdown as possible, and those close quarter, lead the defensive line and make those close quarter hits really count.
Okay, how much of playing prop is technique versus brute strength? Obviously you can't have one without the other, but how do you balance the two?
Again, there isn't a formula, there isn't one. It's not an exact science, so everyone does it differently. So I played against guys that I found unbelievably difficult to play against, and I'd see them play against someone I didn't think was that good, and they'd give them a real hard time. And you speak to the guy and he'd say, yeah, but your technique's perfect for me because you do this, whereas he's all the way down there, he does all this, and the way he has his feet, the way where he puts his shoulder, it just wrecks me and I can't do anything about it. So actually, it's kind of like, you know, it's all to do with the differences of being human. It's kind of, you can train all you want, but what it comes down to is technique, brute strength, and bottle. So there are plenty of guys I've played against who are much bigger than me, much stronger than me. Some of them have got the mindset to work you over, and some of them are there because they're big and strong. They're not there because they're hard men. You know, everyone's pretty tough playing in there, but occasionally you come across someone and you think, this guy should be murdering me, but he hasn't got it up top. Then you come across someone, you know, significantly smaller than you are, and you feel like he'd die before he went backwards, you know, and a lot of it's to do with mindset and courage, really.
Okay, which side would you say is the harder to play, or do you think, again, it depends?
I mean, I'm not one of these guys that thinks my side because it's my side. In terms of pure force, you'd say tight head. But now, because they've got a hooker and a loose head on them, but actually, I always found the force easy to deal with. I didn't find the angles necessarily that easy because it wasn't natural, but in terms of pure strength, if you've got it, you can just hold that position up. I find the loose head more precarious because you're kind of dangling off the edge. Tight heads very rarely get penalised for boring in. If they decide to, you often get spat out the side. You have to work angles that are pretty uncomfortable, and as soon as you work an angle in, your second row struggles to get as much purchase on you because often your backside kicks out and there's a gap between you and the hooker. So I actually think that in terms of pure weight coming through your body, tight head is harder. In terms of technique, I'd say loose head is harder now.
Okay, brilliant. What are the main attributes a player needs to play prop then? So you said you need this, and this to play. What would you say they are? For
me, I'd say very, very strong legs, very strong back and neck. These days, I would say flexible shoulders are very important. They didn't used to be. I'd say they are now. I'd say flexibility all over, actually, very, very important to achieve good body shape. And, you know, aggressive intent, I would say.
What was your training regime like then? Was it mostly, you know, the heavy weights? Yeah,
a lot of heavy weights. A lot of power endurance stuff as well, because it's not just static, but a lot of static strength, a lot of power endurance. Too much running, unfortunately. I wasn't a very good runner, but a good amount of running. I mean, you run a lot in rugby sessions anyway, and a bit of extra running, and really trying to keep on top of the cardio because, you know, almost invariably the big guys struggle with the cardio a bit, and I was no different. So it was really just lifting as heavy as I could and running as much as I could in rugby sessions. And we had at Bath a very, very good fitness team. So individual weights, individual fitness, individual targets, you know, and trying to keep the body fat down was a big thing. So taking a lot of nutritional advice from those guys, and pretty intense.
Okay, so how would your diet build around then as a prop? Do you tend to get more calories allowance than other players in the team?
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work in calorie allowance. It works in, it's a bit more relaxed than that, but that doesn't mean you can get away with anything. It's a case of, right, where are you at? Where do you want to be? What do you need to do more of? What do you need to do less of? And actually rugby tends to keep it pretty real, whereby if you have a big win on a Saturday, by all means go and have a few beers and have a pizza or a kebab on the way home. But on Sunday, you need to be working that off. On Monday, you need to present in shape, hydrated, lean, and ready to train. And really, in terms of diet, it was just about timing, really. So you eat a lot of food, but it's about eating something, having the right things just before you go to bed, having the right things just before training, the right things as you finish training. So it was a lot to do with timing, and actually, instead of what a lot of us did, which was massive breakfast, massive lunch, massive dinner, bed, actually trying to keep your blood sugar a bit more consistent and have still reasonably large meals, but more of them through the day. So actually your body doesn't spike as much, and it becomes a lot, you know, kind of, it's not in fight or flight mode, it becomes a lot more relaxed with itself.
Okay, how many calories would you say you ate in a normal day?
Do you know what, mate? I couldn't tell you. I've got no idea. I've been asked loads of times, I've got no idea. I mean, a lot. A lot. I don't know. No idea. Sorry.
No worries. Did you have any exercises or program that help prevent injuries, especially sort of random areas that rugby players tend to get into?
Yeah. So when you're injured, you have rehab, so you go through your rehabilitation, but you also have prehab, which means before, most days, before a weight session, before a rugby session, you will do position or body part specific prehabilitation, so injury prevention. So you will go, the props and the hookers, for example, will go and do a lot of shoulder work with bands and different exercises with dumbbells. So before you go and train, your body is prepped, properly prepped, and it's not just 10 minutes on a bike, warm up and go and lift. It's proper 20, 30 minute warm up before you even do a weight session. And it's, you know, depending on what you're working that day, so you do a lot of work on your back, a lot of work on your core, through the middle, a lot of work on your neck. So there's an awful lot goes into preventing injuries. Doesn't always work, but it can't hurt.
Okay. Does being a prop, you know, you're subjected to such blunt force traumas as it would, obviously rucking, scrummaging. Do you think being in that environment sort of hardens you off to injury, or do you think it makes you more susceptible? Or actually, is it more sort of, it doesn't matter, it's pot luck whether you do get injured or not?
It's genetics. It's genetics. I mean, it's luck. If you know, if the bloke who works in Topshop down the road came and played prop, he'd get hurt, even if he was the right size. But because I've been doing it forever, my body's used to it. Equally, my body can still break because it's just a body. It's just, you just get used to it. You know, if Mike Tyson punched me in the face, it would kill me. But if you're a pro heavyweight boxer and he punched you, it would probably hurt, but it wouldn't kill you because you're used to getting punched, right? So your body gets used to it, and you know, I bet there isn't a rule. You know, if a centre had to come and play prop, he'd get injured. But if I had to go and play centre, I'd get injured because I'd be getting hit at much more speed from different angles, and I'd have to run quicker more often. So my hamstrings wouldn't like it, my calves wouldn't like it, and all that sort of stuff. So I think your body just gets used to it over time.
Okay. How vital is that second aspect of a prop being able to get around the pitch to a player's game now compared to, say, sort of 10 or 15 years ago?
It's completely vital. I think that there are props still who don't get around very well. There are guys who are so good at scrummaging, especially in the French league, in the top 14, who are so good at scrum time that actually that's enough. At the top level, it doesn't work that way. There's work to do, there's a lot of tackles to make, and players are so good that they'll pick you off. And you need to be mobile, you need to be an athlete. You look at the guys at the top level now, they're big units, but they are athletic guys. There aren't many dump trucks around anymore.
Okay, how did you mentally prepare yourself for a game? Sort of, was there any rituals you had to say, sort of in the change room just before you went out to play? Was there anything you did sort of week in, week out to get yourself ready?
You do the same stuff because you need to. I didn't have any. I made a point of not having any rituals because, I mean, as soon as you can't conduct one of them, you feel nervous that things aren't right, and there was enough nerves knocking around. So for me, I strapped up all my toes, strapped up my feet, because you get a lot of your studs come through your boots when you play prop a lot. Make sure I didn't get blisters. Stick my boots on, go and play. I mean, you end up in a routine because the schedule works the same way every week for 10 or 15 years, you know.
Does that change between club and international level at all?
Not really. I mean, international level, you give yourself a bit more time because you don't know everything is, but not really. Bung a load of, you know, sort of caffeine drink or whatever you can get your hands on, and whatever they've got in there, a load of energy drink, have a bite to eat and get out there and get amongst it, really. There are lots of guys who had rituals, but not me. I just got there about 4 hours before every game and sat on my own for a couple of hours before anyone got changed. So I was just a bit of an early freak, but apart from that, okay.
Okay, brilliant. But what do you make to the new scrum rules? Do you think they're working?
Well, they're not new, actually. They're the old ones that have been reinforced. So they're the original laws. I think it's a good thing. It doesn't mean that scrums are going to go down, aren't going to go down. They still are, but they always did. So I, in a sense, don't know what everyone's moaning about. I mean, 20 years ago, scrums were collapsing, and we mustn't pretend they weren't. But I think the huge reduction in the engagement is definitely a help. It will prolong careers, makes it more likely to stay up. Ultimately, I think it will make it more likely to stay up. As it stands, I like them. I think they're good alterations.
Okay. How much is a prop had to adapt their game to these new laws? Obviously, say there's no hit anymore, and a lot of props were relying on that hit to gain the advantage.
They've had to change it a lot. There are various little technical things I've had to do, but everyone's different in that regard. But actually, it comes a lot more down to brute strength now, and that's the way it should be for me. It shouldn't be about catching someone before they're ready and about timing and that sort of. Timing's still important, but it shouldn't be all about that. It should be about massive, strong blokes properly, you know, contesting over strength. And there are some props who've done really well in that regard since it was altered, and there are some guys who have really struggled because their timing was great, their technique was good, they worked well with the guys around them, but they weren't monstrously strong, and you need to be that now. Okay.
When you did used to play, did you prefer a sort of a longer bind on the play? Because I know players tend to have different types of bind.
Yeah, I couldn't get one. My arms are very short, and I've got very short arms, and I had 5 shoulder reconstructions, so I was lucky if I got a bind at all, to be honest. It was one of the main blessings when I retired from rugby was that I don't have to try and find a bind anymore, because you know, I really, really struggled. I wasn't cheating, my arms just don't go above my head. I can't get there, so I had no option. I'd have loved a long bind, but I just couldn't ever achieve one.
Fair enough. Have you ever gone up against a prop and found it difficult? And if so, who was it?
Oh, plenty of times. Everyone has. There isn't a prop in the world who hasn't been stuffed, you know. Julian White was very, very hard work. I think I played against him a lot of times. I don't think I could ever claim to have got one over on him. I think the best I ever did was about honours even against him. He was very, very good. And his style was perfect to play against me, really. Cobus Visaki, who was a Springbok international, who played for Saracens, was probably the best guy I ever played against. Very, very hard work, not a big guy, very, very strong, technically very good, worked brilliantly with the guys around him. And yeah, it's just bloody hard. I mean, sometimes you're 10 minutes into a game and you think, how am I going to play another hour against this bloke? I don't know how I'm going to get through it. And part of the game is firstly you try and work it out with the guys around you. So you try different things, but you also find out if you've got any bottle or not, because it's easy to duck out of those situations.
Okay, that kind of leads to my next question: is how do you adapt when you know you're in for a roasting at the scrum?
You try something different, and that can be try a different technique. That can be cheat. It can be, we had a guy who used to play here. I won't name him, but if we were struggling in one game, we had no other option but to try and get him off the field. And by that, I don't mean hurt him at all. I didn't mean that at all. I mean try and get him into an altercation. So he swung a couple in because he was quite moody. And 15 minutes in, something happened in a scrum that he didn't like, and he was swinging punches, and we got him off. He got a yellow card. I mean, one of our guys got a yellow card too, but they lost their most important guy. We profited, and when he came back on, he had to watch himself because he was on a yellow. So, that's pretty old school, but kind of if it's not working, whack him sort of thing. That wouldn't happen anymore, I don't think. But you try whatever you can, and sometimes it doesn't work. But sometimes just sheer willpower will be enough if you've got enough of it.
How much of playing prop is psychological, and do you think it tends to be more psychological than what other positions would need?
Yeah, I think well, fly half's very psychological, isn't it? Because they don't have a huge amount of physical contact, but they have to think a lot. They've got more time. They're competing more against themselves than they are anybody else. But at prop, you're directly competing against another bloke, and it's massively psychological. Yeah, I mean, equally, most blokes at the top level have got the psychology to go and do it, and they've also got the bodies to go and do it. So everyone's big and strong. So where do you get your advantage? It generally was a lot to do with strength of will.
Okay, how much of a rapport did you have with your hooker? Did you sort of spend extra time with them to try and develop a deeper relationship to benefit?
I didn't deliberately try and spend extra time. They had a very close bond. The props tend to have the closest bonds in the team, I'd say. But hookers, I was great mates with all the hookers I played with, still am. I think you go with the front row guys, you go somewhere that other people in the team don't go together, and it doesn't. I don't know if it's any more special than anywhere else, but it certainly feels important when you're doing it. And invariably, your best mates in the team, your props, and your hookers.
Brilliant. Who do you think are the two best props in the world? So one for either side, and if so, why? What makes them so good at what they do?
Oh, good question. If I could pick, I'd pick John Arfoa, who plays for Ulster, the All Black, and just signed for Gloucester. I'd pick him because of his all-round game. Scrummaging's very good, but his all-round game is just outstanding. He's a big unit, carries well, tackles well, big work rate. I'd have him at the moment. Loose heads. The Beast is good. Mutwawira, he's good. Steenkamp's good. Thomas Domingo from France, I think on his day, is very, 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 very good prop. So Domingo and Arfoa, you wouldn't go far wrong with those two. Yeah, I'll probably go with that.
Okay, brilliant. And obviously a prop, big, strong guy, so we need some stats from you then. So sort of in your heyday, what was sort of your biggest bench and squat?
I couldn't do normal squats because my shoulders, that's their range, so I couldn't hold the bar. So they had this special bar, got this special bar in where it comes over here, so you can actually hold it, the weights go on the side, but you can actually hold it here. I didn't do a lot of squatting, to be honest, just because of my shoulders, but I did a box squat of 270 kilos once, so I repped out 270 kilos going down to a box. Bench press about 200 kilos, something like that.
Brilliant. Let's move on. How hard of a decision was it for you when you decided to retire?
It wasn't hard at all. My doctor said, you've got to retire because your hand's knackered, so that was it. I said, no, I'm all right. And he said, you're not all right, you've got to stop, you can't play anymore. So that's that. So it was decided for me, it wasn't my decision. Pretty hard for a while, but, and it's still hard now, but get over it, the end's coming,
Okay, brilliant. Last question. Do you know when you look back across your career, do you have a game or memory that stands out sort of, that was sort of your favourite moment of the sport?
It's funny, an old coach once said to me, when you retire and look back, it's a big blur and you won't remember much about it. So try and make some memories along the way, And I think whenever anyone asks me for my best memory, I actually First cap was good in South Africa. Beating Argentina in Buenos Aires in 2002 was good. Beating Leicester with 14 men at Welford Road when they got all their World Cup stars back in 2003 was good. Winning the European Challenge Cup with Bath was great. I'm not very sentimental, to be honest. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I loved all the mates I made and the memories I made, and I love Bath, and you know, I'm very proud to have, very pleased to have done what I've done. But I'll be honest with you, mate. I don't look back and smile about it. I don't look back and feel all warm inside. I just think it's something I did, and playing for England, great. I'm very, very pleased to have done that. But I'm more pleased because my mum and dad have got a son who played for England than I am that I did it. You know, or my brother's got a brother who played for England. That makes me more happy than the fact that I've played for England, if you know what I mean. It's like my old jerseys, mate. You know, I think I've got one. The others, they're all gone. If you want one, you can have one, sort of thing. I know I've done it, and that's enough. I don't need to go on about it or look back and cry my eyes out. I sort of get on with it.